Hey everybody, it is time to spin this wheel and find out which vintage game we're taking a look at this week. Hope it's a good one. Just kidding, I own all of these, they're all good. Yeah, except for this one. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so first thing I'm going to tell you, before I even launch into anything about the game in particular, what you need to know is that I have done you the favor of just hitting record without doing any practice attempts at all. I just launched into Super Mario Bros. 2 because I am not good at this game. We will talk about it some more once we get rolling, but like, for your pleasure, I introduce to you some of the worst gaming footage you will see. Please know that I am decent at video games. Like, there is footage of me being fairly decent at a number of games. I don't totally suck, I don't think. But when it comes to Super Mario Bros. 2, yeah, not a thing that I've put a tremendous amount of time into. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the game in general. So, we all know the whole spiel. I'm not going to bore you to death with the fact that this game started out, like, originally there was a Super Mario Bros. 2 that was just more levels on the Super Mario 1 engine, basically, although I didn't call them gaming engines back then, but basically that's what it was. It was the same exact sprites, well, with some new additions, actually. But yeah, if you've never played the Lost Levels, go ahead and do that. It's super much fun. You can do that on Super Mario Bros. DX for the Game Boy Color, as the first place I played those levels. But yeah, anyway, that's another game that I've reviewed on this here channel. And if you watch that, you can see me playing half decently at a Mario game. Anyway, but here's the funny thing about Super Mario 2. Yeah, it was like the Lost Levels, the guy from Nintendo America, I do not remember his name. Shout it at your screen if you like. It's not going to make me say it. But he was like, no, we can't sell this in America. It's too hard. People are going to have too hard of a time with it. And yeah, maybe we would have. I mean, Lost Levels are definitely harder. But, you put enough time into Super Mario Bros. 1, the thing that would have been and was Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan, is doable. It's just, it is harder. There's no getting around that fact. And so, yeah, we got the reskinned Doki Doki Panic. Yes. I don't speak Japanese. Please forgive my ignorance. But yeah, Doki Doki Panic was the game. I have actually, just played a little bit of that once, just out of curiosity to see how similar it was to Super Mario 2. Yeah. So, it's really the same game. It is exactly the same game, and so, all of the same powers and everything that the different players have, which is, interesting that this is where we get the lore that, Luigi is taller, and that he jumps higher or better. Because there is later in the game footage, you will see me when I finally play as Mario, which before that is the only time in which I intentionally died because I chose Luigi again. And then I realized, I really shouldn't play this with Luigi. I should play it with Mario. And, yeah, so I let myself die so that I could go back to the loading screen and choose a different character. It would be a better game if you could switch between characters mid-game, but yeah, that wasn't really a feature that a lot of games had. Games with selectable characters, you weren't reselecting characters in the middle of the game. That just wasn't a thing for a long time in gaming. So, yeah. Anyway, I would have liked that, but that's neither here nor there. So you choose your different character, they have their different skills and abilities, and away you go. And the Doki Doki Panic is exactly like Super Mario 2, a couple of differences that people have noted that are very small and that I don't really care to go into at present, because that's not the part of the game that interests me the most. The part of the game that interests me the most is how this is a complete betrayal of everything that Super Mario Bros. Is. Yeah, I don't know. I have always been weird about this game. I really, really have. Do I own a copy? Oh, of course I own a copy. Like, I'm not gonna have an NES collection and not have Super Mario 2 in it. That's absurd. But am I going to play it often? No, because I haven't, obviously. And I've owned it for several years. So if I was going to play it often, I could have in the intervening years in which I've owned a physical copy, but I have not put much time into it at all. My son, on the other hand, has actually beaten it. He put a lot of time into it. And so literally, and I'm not kidding you, everything that I know about how to play this game comes from having seen my friends play it back in the day and me thinking, this is not the Mario that I like. It didn't hit that formula, because when Super Mario 3 came out, it was like, oh, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. And of course, Super Mario 3, one of my favorite games of all time, and also on everybody's list as one of the top video games ever made, because obviously it is the ultimate that you can do in platforming on the NES. It is the absolute maximization of everything that console is capable of, and it's a perfect game. Super Mario 2 is not a perfect game. It's not. Oh boy, there are things I just don't like about it and never have. First of all, it doesn't play the same. The controls are mushy. Like, if you're playing as Luigi, they are exceptionally mushy. Here's the characters in terms of mushiness, in case you ever care to know. Luigi, number one, most mushy, borderline unplayable. Because when you're having to jump on those eggs to throw them back at... Why am I forgetting her name? It's something stupid. She's a character that I've never liked, and she comes from Mario 2. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm not going to remember the names of my enemies. Yeah. So when you're throwing those eggs back at her, getting the timing on the Luigi jumps is difficult, because he's just so floaty in his jumping. And so it really goes against your ability to make, snap movements that allow you to quickly jump on the egg and then get back to her and be able to throw it back at her. So yeah, because Super Mario 2, you must kill monsters with their own unborn children. But then again, they throw their unborn children at you as weapons, so the morality here is all over the map. But yeah, so Luigi, most floaty. Princess, number 2, second most floaty. Toad, third most floaty. And then, of course, Mario, almost good controls, but not quite. Not quite. You can feel it in the controls that it's not quite Super Mario 1. And if I sound super judgy on this, it's because I am. I'm not going to pretend that I have not been silently judging this game all these years. So yeah, like, I'm going to be as honest as I can be about this one, because it's it's had it too good for too long. No, is that for those of us who remembered, you know, very much like how, you know, there were people who, when Bob Dylan went electric, yelled Judas at his concert. You know, Judas! That concert footage exists. It was released. It's a fun one to listen to hear someone be that betrayed by someone who just played an electric guitar. And I am just as absurdly betrayed by Super Mario 2. And so, like, yeah. But I just, over the years, I've had an unrealistic dislike of this game based in the fact that it wasn't what I wanted, and technically what I wanted was the lost levels, which, you know, when I found out that that's what had happened, I was like, but why? Like, we could have had the better game, you know, because Lost Levels in many ways is a better game. I'm sorry, this is my opinionated time in which I'm opinionated on the channel that I have. So yeah, that's about as bad as I'll say on this game, is that it's a betrayal of what Super Mario Bros. Had set up, because it's not the same game. It's not. And the controls are mushy, and yeah, it just does not feel like a Mario game to me. So let's set that aside. I am trying, I promise you, I am trying to set aside my own judgments so much, because for years I have been at odds with this game. And I have owned it for almost as long as I have owned a Nintendo, an NES, which I bought my first NES. My family never owned one, so I didn't get one till I was in college. So I've been collecting for the NES for 24 years, something like that, 23 years. So it's been a while. I have owned my copy of Super Mario Bros. 2 for about that long. And in that time, I have almost never played it. Almost never. And so my judgment of this game is, it's hard to get past my own biases about it, but I am going to try to, and I did try to as I was playing it. And I will tell you this, I did find myself enjoying it more once I started to get the hang of it. Because here's my biggest critique. Aside from the fact that, like, you know, because now we've seen Mario do all kinds of things, and I can't get too hung up on, like, oh, this is a betrayal because, like, would Mario be an elephant? Is his hat sentient? You know, like, we've gone far afield from the, you know, the question of, like, does he have weird dreams? Which now we know, yes, he does. Anyway, sorry, I should have put a spoiler alert on that for those who don't know. This is one of the most infamous video game endings of all time, so I can't possibly be spoiling it for you. But anyway, or I can't be the first one to spoil it for you. Surely someone else has spoiled it for you before now. Anyway, so, yeah. So the idea about it being a betrayal of what Super Mario Bros. Had set out to be. Like, I should cool my jets on that. Okay, so let's look at it as a game. And as a game, it's okay. It's an okay game. It is. I did have a moderate amount of fun playing it. And so that's not nothing, because there are a lot of NES games, even in my collection, things that are just a complete and utter frustration. Like 720 Degrees, that skateboarding game. I hate that game. Like, it's so hard to play. It is so hard to, like, eke out a momentary pleasure while playing that game. It is, like, torturous. Very seldom will you see me with a smile on my face playing that game, which is why you will very seldom see me playing that game. I play it when I'm like, is it really that bad? And then I'll play it again and I'll be like, ugh. Because I hate it. I really do. I really, really do. So there are some NES games out there, like there's NES Hard, but there's also NES Bad. Because like those bad NES games are really, really problematic. And so, yeah, we can't pretend that there aren't a whole host of, you know, like, infamously things like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a really, truly awful game. You know, there are others that, you know, just things that people hate on this console. Yeah, whatever. It's fine. Those games are worse. This one is better than those. Because there are games that are like borderline unplayable. Yeah. And that's, you know, I just think angry video game nerd, and the many times that he has chucked that NES controller, or, you know, said horrific things about a game that just, yeah, there are some real stinkers out there. And he has built a career off of pointing this fact out, much to our delight. Anyway, but the thing of it is that, like, yeah, where does this situate in the realm of NES games? Like, taking out of it that it's a Mario game, where does this one sit? Well, you know, honestly, it's, it is a reasonably smart platformer with some interesting game mechanics, a really good soundtrack, you know, interesting character design that's not necessarily good, but is at the very least interesting. And, yeah, it tries some things. It doesn't always succeed, but it tries some things, right? So, yeah, things like pulling up root vegetables, you know, you don't do a lot of that in other Mario games. And in other Mario games, like, you don't have this thing where you, push the A button and up to, like, pull stuff up, or to, like, you know, if you jump on the heads of your enemies, you don't ride them. In other Mario games, you stomp them. And, you know, so this whole thing about, like, you know, riding on top of, and then you can pick them up, but if you hold them for too long, they can turn back on you. Like, that whole thing is new and interesting and kind of fun once you get the hang of it. You can see that it's taken me up till now in the footage to have even remotely a decent hang on that mechanic. So, yeah, how hard can I complain about the game when I'm not good at it? Well, here's my statement about that. Super Mario Bros. 1 is a masterclass in game design. Why? Because it teaches you how to play the game without ever telling you anything. There's no text on the screen that says, stomp on the heads of these Goombas, because that does a thing. Here's how to pick up a coin. Here's how to break bricks. You know, it just intuitively walks you through understanding how you will want to interact with the environment, having been designed in such a way that you will want to interact with the environment in the way that it's designed to be interacted with. So that's amazing level design and game design. You know, Shigeru Miyamoto, like, is a god of knowing how to teach you to play the game without, like, tedious, you know, here's how to walk around. And there are good games that do that, you know, like Halo, when Master Chief wakes up for the first time and they're like, learn how to walk around. You know, and you're like, wow, yeah, Mario never told me here's how to walk, you know. But you think about it, Mario games tend to be intuitive. Super Mario Bros. 2 is not intuitive. It is anything but. You learn through trial and error, and you learn through maybe having seen other people do it, because, like, a lot of the game mechanics in this game just don't make a lot of sense. You know, the first time you pick up a potion and then you throw it on the ground and it turns into a door, and then you go in that door and you're in another world, like on the dark side of the overworld, and then you're like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing here? And before you can realize what you're supposed to be doing there, you zip back to the other world, and then it's done and you've wasted your opportunity. So that's kind of problematic, you know, unless, of course, you played the levels enough to figure out what it is. See, I figure kids who grew up with this game, who had this game, would have put time into it and then would have realized, like, oh, here's how you play this. Because I remember my friend Will, he was my connection. He was my first NES connection. Then my neighbors across the street got one, and that became my NES connection. And so, yeah, like, we played a ton of Super Mario 1, and we played a ton of Super Mario 3. Super Mario 2, they didn't have it. I had other friends who had it, and they were like, eh. Because I think what happened with Super Mario 2 is that people kind of put it on the back shelf and waited on it, and then learned to enjoy it later. I never had that. I just had the initial reaction from friends who were like, nah, it's not it. It is not it. Let's play these other Mario games. And so, like, that was my experience coming up with it. And so that colors everything that I think about the game, but so much of that comes from the fact that the gameplay is not intuitive, the controls are kind of mushy. That's not great. But you know what? It has gorgeous level design, it has a great soundtrack, like really one of the all-out bangers of NES soundtracks, like really, really good. And so, like, it is a decent game. In the end, I have to come around and say it is a decent game. But that said, my God, it does have a learning curve. And I don't know when I'm going to have the patience. At some point in my life, I need to beat this game. I don't know when I'm going to develop that patience. I don't know. Maybe over the summer one of these times. Anyway, people, sorry. I've talked more about my personal history with this game than I have this game itself, but I think it's hard for me to extrapolate the two, to unwind those two when they are wound around each other so many times. Anyway, let's put a final score on it. Alright, so my final score for Super Mario Bros. 2, a game that I'm definitely biased about, so feel free to take this entire thing with the biggest grain of salt you can find. But my final score is a 7.5 out of a possible 10 copies of the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie, the terrible one, which I saw in the theater. Yeah. Anyway, that terrible movie on VHS, 7.5 copies out of a possible 10. That's 75%. That's a solid, like, I recommend that you play this game, but I recommend that you play all the other good games on the console first. Like, this is what you're playing when you're, like, down a bit. You know, like you're playing 3D World Runner and stuff. And you're like, oh, it's time for me to also play Super Mario Brothers 2, I guess. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, people. I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.